Welcome to my 10-minute business insight on mynewsroom.ca. Joining me today is Canada's leading expert in a couple of really interesting areas of business. And one is family business, and more specifically, the transfer of family business from one generation to the next. He and his family were serial entrepreneurs. I think, Tom, you told me it was like four businesses, 3 generations, I think. And this is Tom Deans, by the way. And he is now a world expert on this. He's clearly recognized around the planet, speaks all over the place, is a New York Times bestseller on the topic. And I'm really thrilled that you can join me today, Tom. But you've come through Saskatchewan a few times, and you've spoken to tech groups, you've spoken to financial groups that financial advisors put together. You're certainly familiar with what we do here, but I'm really curious about big topics that you're bumping into and the intergenerational transfer thing. And as we talk, we're in the pandemic lockdown. Has that had any impact on anything?
Well, Paul, it really has. First of all, thank you for having me on. And I have to say that the one thing that I'm seeing is that the pandemic is really amplifying both the very best of family business. You're seeing family coalesce around the challenge that most balance sheets are feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And you're also seeing those schisms, those fractures, those fissions in those family relationships being amplified. So if there was something bad going on, this extra pressure on family businesses is really causing some significant problems.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably pretty standard across the board, but likely in family business, you feel it just a little bit more, simply because things are notched up in a family business, aren't they? I mean, you've got all the normal business pressures, but then you've got those emotional ties and those bloodlines and all of that. It just seems to amplify things a little bit. And I'm wondering about generational stuff now. We've got demographics that are factoring into this. The boomers are exiting and the next generation is taking over the business. And has that been as smooth as you would think it should be? As the families think it's gonna be?
No, it's not going particularly well at all, frankly. You have business owners who, quite frankly, disregarded a lot of advice from a lot of their professional advisors who said, listen, Bill or Mary, you're moving into your 70s. You've got 80% of your wealth, 90% of your wealth wrapped up in that operating business, and you have no exit plan. You have no transition plan. In fact, Bill and Mary, you have no will. You are a train wreck. And of course, then comes along COVID-19, and you've got people who are really in a bad place, and not for any lack of people trying to get them out of, to take action, but boy, holy smokes, that is not a great place to be. And so some people heeded that call and moved forward with exit plans and transition plans and got some of that retained earnings out into the next generation's hands or invested to fund their own retirement. So it's been very polarizing. Some people are really happy and some people are extremely stressed out and really now looking for answers on how to transition. No longer does anyone have to make the case that you need an exit plan. Everyone now gets it big time.
In my world and my business world, I encounter some who, particularly the next generation, the younger generation, saying, I would like to get some guidance on this and get some outside input, and that the older generation is a little bit of pushback on this. They don't want to spend the money that might be involved, or I didn't need to be getting any training. You don't need to be getting any training. I mean, the whole education component and finding a place where the younger generation can go and get some guidance. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's really ill-conceived, particularly founders who don't want to invest in the next generation in their education so that they can scale the business. I mean, in the most ironic way, they're killing their own succession plan. It's a lack of investment in their own strategy to protect their wealth and give that next generation both the tools and the confidence to either buy that family business at full market value, or at least to stick around in a senior leadership role and transition the management. Either way, it's really silly not to support those investments in the next generation.
Yeah, and generally speaking, most family businesses, the next generation grows up in the business, so they don't have any external viewpoints that are, it's you're kind of doing your own laundry here. And I know you're an advocate of getting some outside input on that.
Well, I'm also a big advocate. Oh, I am, absolutely. And I'm a big advocate of the next generation actually really tapping into their own authentic voice and becoming owners themselves. So the temptation is to the next generation to stay in the legacy based business, which is I will continue to do what my parents did because I don't know, that's who we are. What you talk about, what I talk about, what outside advisors who are guiding these transitions talk about is the importance of pivoting. Like you were talking about, I know, because I've heard you speak, talking about driving innovation and taking risks and challenging the assumptions that are going into traditional business models, constantly looking at those things and saying, how can we do this better? I know we've made this product line for 50 years, but is there something better that we should be making? Like really stepping away from tradition, which is the thing that fuels family businesses. This is who we are. This is what we've always done. Even the unborn will be farming, right? Like that. Yeah. Those blinders are devastating to family businesses when you look at the data. They just don't last. Like we need to change. And the way that we need to change is to empower the next generation to get outside guidance, outside insights, outside coaching, to have confidence, to put wind in their sails, to take those risks.
Yeah, the risk of sounding a bit self-serving, do you have any recommendations on where people can go on that to find that outside input?
Well, listen, I'm not a member of tech, but I've given over a 1,000-page speeches, over 100 tech presentations all across North America, invested in the US. Listen, I think it's a fantastic organization. And I belonged to a different organization when I was CEO of our family business. I won't mention it, but we didn't have facilitated monthly meetings. We rotated the chair among ourselves, right. And they were fun meetings, but they weren't particularly productive. And we didn't bring in outside speakers, which of course tech does. Every month you've got a thought leader coming in, challenging, educating, holding people to account. I mean, that's really your job as the tech chair, holding people to account for what they commit to their peers to do in the next 30 days. Listen, I think tech is a great organization. I'm very fond of it. I think it does really, really great work. And I think in times of crisis, this is what people need. This is what leaders need. There's an old saying, when to invest in advertising and marketing, right? In the middle of crisis. Same thing with leadership. You don't turtle, you don't run from it, you actually invest in it. And the return on investment on training, coaching, particularly for leaders in the middle of crisis, which is a very lonely place to be a CEO. I know, this is the time, this is the moment.
Tom, when you speak and sort of your philosophy is that your job as a business owner is not to pass the business to the next generation, but in fact to pass the wealth to the next generation. Your job is to preserve family wealth. The business may be the vessel in which it's carried, but it's not a necessity that you transfer the business. How do people respond to that?
There's a lot of doughy-eyed people in my audience. There's a lot of people, they look so kind of confused by that message.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I think they're confused is they misconstrue what a retained earnings are, right? I say to a business owner, if you were to take out $10,000 out of your business right now and give that $10,000 to your son or daughter, I mean, would you do that right now? And people go, no, it's my business. It's my business. It's my profits. And I go, okay, so if you die tomorrow, why would you give the whole thing to them? Or if you were to take out $10,000 out of your retained earnings of your business today and give it to your son and daughter and say, hey, by the way, my business is for sale. Would you like to buy it? And don't tell me you don't have any money because I just gave you $10,000. In fact, do you want to return that $10,000 right now and buy those $10,000 worth of shares at fair market value? Watch what the answer is. Paul, money never lies. If the kids return that business, you may have a great employee and a future owner. If they don't return the money, newsflash, they don't want the farm. They don't want the restaurant. They don't want the garage. Whatever it is, They don't want it. Why wouldn't you want to find that out as a business owner? Why would you want to continue to make assumptions that everyone in the family loves the business the way the great founder does? Newsflash, very few people do.
Just well, and you've got a tool for that. And if people would buy your book, Every Family's Business, you'll find the magical 12 questions. I must say, I found them very enlightening. But you've come up with 12 questions that if two generations answer them, they'll get the answer they're looking for.
I know there are some business owners in this country who have blown up literally billion-dollar family businesses. And I've met them and I've talked to them. I've worked with their families after the fact. And I have said to a couple, had you spent $24.95 and taken an hour to answer these 12 questions, you could have saved, I'm not kidding, $1 billion. You would have found out a long time ago that your children do not want your business, or they do want your business, or only one wants your business. But this business of giving an equal number of shares to all your children and thrusting them into business together as equal partners is crazy. It is crazy. And it will happen multiple times in the province of Saskatchewan today.
Tom, we've run out of time. We could go on for a long time. Thanks for this. And listen, thanks for taking the time to join us and provide us with this insight. Tom Deans has been my guest, the author of Every Family's Business and Canada's leading expert on family business and intergenerational transfer. Again, Tom, thanks.
Thanks, Paul.